Okay, basics of prompt engineering. The nice thing is you can all go home with another buzzword added to your list of things that you claim to be good at. So, what is prompt engineering? First of all, what is a prompt? A prompt is the thing you input a large language model, you input any kind of generative intelligence, slip of the tongue there. Also, when you want to create an image, the input is a prompt. For example, tell me about the weather. Then the output can, for example, be that. The weather can vary greatly depending on your location and the time of the year. It can be sunny, rainy, snowy, or cloudy temperature, and humidity also can play blah, 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 blah. This is a perfectly fine answer to what you prompted. However, I imagine it's probably not what you wanted to know. You probably wanted to know the temperature, if you need to get an umbrella or not. So what did we do wrong here? We wrote the prompt in a way that was misunderstandable. And this is now what we want to learn in the very basics, now that we understand on very basic level how do AI think, how do they work, to provide them with prompts that we enable them to come up with answers that we actually want. So, and this of course is every time that we create something or we generate something that we did not want, that we need to implement the prompting. So prompt engineering is basically the art. It's more of an art than an engineering. So there was also the notion of calling it prompt massaging, because it's no fair science. You cannot say I'm changing a prompt with parameter A, and the parameter A will translate to the output A or output B. So it's not a fair science, but it's the process of crafting prompts that lead you to a desired result. And these desired results can vary widely from you want it to be helpful in writing an essay, an email for you, to it should create an output that you want to use in a kind of process automation, which we will learn in another microclass, in the prototyping microclass, to be very helpful for you. And it all started, or the term comes from Anthropic. Anthropic is one of the big players in generating LLMs, Anthropic, that searched for a prompt engineer some years ago, and the name just stuck. So they just came up with it, and the name just stuck, and now everybody calls it prompt engineer. The important thing about here is already the process. So we try to get iteratively better on what we're doing. We start with an idea, we create a prompt, there comes an output, we are not happy with the output, so we do it better, we try to do it again. And what I will show you in the basic techniques is now what the core concepts of this is, in what dimensions we should think about improving the prompt, and in the advanced techniques, we will look at some more comprehensive and complicated techniques that will, if you don't know them yet, that will really set you apart from what you could do with prompting so far. It still sticks true, garbage in, garbage out. The same with the biases. If you give incomplete data, if you give bad examples, if you get bad questions, then the answers will be bad answers. Surprisingly, a lot of the LLMs, or not surprisingly, it's very much by design, they can overlook grammatical errors or typos or a missing comma, but only half of the sense. That is something they cannot really work with. And the other thing, of course, be careful with confidential information. You want to share as much as possible, but you probably also don't want to overshare. So if you know some specific of, let's say, the next up-and-coming BMW that's not public yet, you should not share that with an LLM. Again, because it's a huge black box, it's super unlikely that this LLM will share this information with the next respondent who asks it, what engine will this car have? But it's also not 100% formidable that this will not happen. So, well, there is actually quite a lot of technique around that. So the question was to some, are there technologies, are there techniques, methods to make it impossible for using confidential information? There are technical solutions to that, for example, pseudonymization, that you basically take the information that you have and pseudonymize them before you feed them into an LLM. These kind of tools can, for example, be implemented in the data pipeline of the LLMs, and this tries to get it away from confidential information. This is probably one set of solution. Another set of solution is that, for example, a lot of the LLMs claim that when you pay for it, that they don't use your input for training the model. However, that's just taking the word for it. You can't really prove that, and I would not dare to leave it out there. And another thing that, of course, always you can do is, if you're not sure if the data is conformational or not, you can ask the LLM first, what do you know about the next upcoming BMW 5 Series, for example, and just use the information that it gives you to feed it back into itself. And to avoid this. So in general, this is a not solved problem. The conjugation mostly comes from that we don't know how to work with it, rather than it being a acute threat. It's very much like the corona problem. The problem is not that corona kills everybody. The problem is we don't know how to treat it. That's why we should stay inside, get vaccinated, and wear masks. We have been through that. And very much of the same logic applies here as well, although in a totally different context, and probably it's not even a good comprehension if I think about this too strongly. But this is why we're here. We don't want to think ourselves anymore. The AI should think. So, prompt contains the following elements. Of course, the instruction. What task should it do? Tell me about the weather, for example. But the other thing, the LLM always needs context, and context is something of the very overlooked things. If we are talking to each other, we assume so much context. We know that we are in the same room. I can see from your face a lot of things. If you ask me what is the weather and you're holding a jacket or a t-shirt, I know what you probably want from this information. So we can assume a lot of context because we have so many senses. An LLM can't. An LLM is just a chatbot. It's even less than a chatbot, but it does not know what you're holding in your hand, what you're thinking, what your facial impression is, what your history is or stuff. So context, super important. We need to give an LLM all the relevant context if we expect it to answer sensitive to the context. Also, input data is something that we in many times want to give. So not only tell me about a very abstract concept, but take the data that I have and work with it. And then we also often want to define the output. In what way do you want to have the output? Do you want to have an essay on what weather is in general, or do you want one line that just includes the temperature? And if you want to have the temperature, then of course specify in what units you want to have it. Okay, those are the general techniques that we talk about. You don't have to write them down. You don't have to write the photograph them. In the T12S, it's another exercise for you to maneuver the website that I built. There will be a cheat sheet for prompt engineering, which you can have, you can download, you can print out, you can make it your own, whatever you want. But let's go through these 6 basic techniques step by step. Including details. We have been jumping in this already. We can add a we call it here garbage prompt. I'm not sure if this is fair to it. But how do I add numbers in Excel? How do I add a number in Excel? It will give you a very generic answer on how to add a number in Excel. Again, what does it try to do? It tries to guess the next word, but it does not have any context. It does not know anything what you want, so it will give you the most generic answer that it can come up with to satisfy that answer. Also, LLMs don't ask questions, they just answer. So they don't ask you what we would do. If I asked you how do you put a number in Excel, you would ask me what kind of number, for what do you need it, and stuff like that. So all this context we need to be very explicit about. There's nobody to challenge it with us, so we do have to do a lot of metacognition. This is actually a rather hard part for some of us when we do it the first time. What do we want to do with the information? What is the context information? Who's president, for example? What should an AI do with that? What president, when president, of what president? Whereas the better prompt, of course, is who is the president of Mexico 2021, and how frequently are the elections? So give it something to foresee the expected results. LLMs can't read your mind, exactly. I think we've been through that. The next, adopt a persona. So oftentimes we are also assuming that we get different answers depending on different personas we are talking to. And the same thing, of course, happens here as well. Let's stay with our food example. I can first assume it, give it context and say I'm a German, I'm an Italian, I'm a French person, what is my favorite food, and it will answer according to this. But we can also adjust it the other way around and say you're now an Italian, how do I make a fantastic pizza? And it will probably give us an answer from, as an Italian would do it, with a very craftsman answer and very much how important it is to make a perfect dough. On the other hand, we could say, okay, now you're a food plant processing manager. How do I make a perfect pizza? And this persona would probably give us an answer that is a pizza that is highly scalable in a manufacturing plant. So it's super important in that we need to give the AI the opportunity to understand in what respect should it answer. In particular, when we're putting this on the very common use case that I encourage all of you to do of trying to challenge business models. So we can make the challenge business model in several ways. So we can say you're a prospective customer. What do you see as problems with this business model? You are a prospective investor. What do you see as problems? You're an engineer. What do you see as problems with this business model? Meaning that the customer, of course, is looking more at the usage. The VC is looking at scalability. The engineer is looking at technical feasibility. And this is what we want to give here as well. One very easy task you might have tried out. If not, I would highly recommend it to you because it makes this very clear and is very fun. Write a poem or write a document in the style of Shakespeare, in the style of Goethe, in the style of whoever, and it will complete those tasks all to the best of its knowledge or the best of its programming in those different styles, and it usually does it quite well and at times also quite fun. Don't expect it, however, to come up with novel thoughts. It will create average thoughts of course. Why is that on? Okay, all good. Attention, we've been through that. You just want attention, that just want attention, and that's what happens in the style of Shakespeare, for example, gives it the attention that the writing style should be Shakespearean in the terms of what are problems with the business model from the perspective of an engineer. It will give it the word problem, the attention of technical problems, prospective technical problems. So attention is the reason why it works, and attention is the reason why different personas are so important. Delimiters, another very basic technique that you might want to use when you ask about a larger piece of text. For example, the question is, what is the summary of this long text, and you write the long text. Now, if you don't use delimiters and just set it in somewhere, so summarize the text delimited by the triple ticks in the haiku, if you leave that away, then the AI has to assume where does the text that you wanted to summarize start and where does it end. On the other hand, if you give it delimiters like triple quotes or triple backticks or anything really that is uniquely, then it will make it very, very easy to understand what is the piece of data that you want to be manipulated. Very easy thing. I think that makes sense for us. You, of course, can use XML tags as well. You can use so much. If you're using this on an API level, this will become super, super important again. And we will be using at the API, I think, later today. Because then again, ChatGPT does a lot of things of the heavy loading that the API would not do already in its programming. It's not just the LLM on a chatbot, it's actually a lot of tools in between. So it does that for you. If you're using the API, it does not do that for you. So you need to qualify what is the content I want to adjust, and what is the content that I want to manipulate. So important, very basic technique. Provide examples. This is a technique that you might also be familiar with if you cannot exactly say, okay, what should the output do? You should provide examples. For example, the sentiment of the sentence, this is awesome, is positive. The sentiment of this is bad is negative. Wow, that music was rad. I think it should be bad. It's negative. So you give it some examples so it knows that that was a horrible show. The output should probably, that was a horrible show, / negative. What it basically does under the hood is it already writes this in the context window, and it says that it's in the context window, and the context window always had the / before the judgment that this is the most likely thing to happen next. Makes it, I think, very clear. One thing that we need to talk about here, of course, is that if you use examples, we will see that in short engineering, is that those examples can introduce new biases. So if you just start with the first example, this is awesome, / positive, and you don't have the other examples, and then you say the next, what a horrible show. And it would say maybe / positive, because that is obviously what you told me. You told me I should look at the sentence and make / positive behind that. That can happen, so when you do that, notice what it might look at. There has been this phenomenon, for example, of an AI, that was a research AI, that should classify types of fish. And it classified fish better than any human could. And it did that for example, for a specific, I have no idea about fish that I have to reclaim that, a very rare type of fish, very beautiful fish that a lot of fishermen used for a trophy. So what the researchers then found out that after looking at all the figures, it did not look at if this is fish because of the fins or because of the color, because of the fingers, because all the training data of this fish were people holding up this fish. So they had some kind of two fingers. So the AI apparently thought if it's a fish who is held up by a human, it's this kind of fish. And this is what can happen here as well. You can, for example, say, bring some kind of bias in it, which might be a little bit hard to figure out. It's probably not as funny as having fish with fingers and those be the most valuable fishes. But still be aware that garbage in is garbage out, and biases are biases not because the AI is bad or lazy, but because it's the nature of the AI. Probably the most valuable step that you can ask the AI to do is to add the single line, the short line, think step by step, or explain your reasoning. In this case, you make it very easy for the AI to follow specific steps, not to jump to conclusions. Meaning that if you give it a complicated problem that for us would need some deduction and need several steps of processing, for example, we get a huge text and we write it down in what are the different kind of actors, and then we do other things. If you don't ask that of the AI will jump to the conclusion because that's its job. It tries to guess the most likely outcome. There have been very funny fails of AIs early last year. Most of them have been fixed, so we cannot make fun of it anymore, not because the AI got better, but mostly because there has been data pipeline processing optimization. But still, if you say, look at Hamlet, who's in love with whom, then it will probably try to make the first conclusion. The most named person is probably Hamlet, and the second most person is this and that. And we'll jump to a conclusion that might be wrong. If you say, first of all, write out all the characters, second of all, write out all the relationships, and then say who's in love with whom, then it puts all this in the context window and all this reasoning in the context window, and it's way more likely to give you a useful answer. Okay, I have not lost you. That is good. But a question, very good.
Do you think it's as effective as letting the AI evolve its own context window?
Fantastic.
As effective as if I provide the context window?
Yeah. So the question is, how effective is the AI-generated context window versus the presented by me context window? The context window that you can provide is usually more valuable because the AI tends to regress to the middle and tends to regress to common thought. So it's okay for that kind of task where you say, okay, you just need to write out a list of characters. You just need to write something obvious. If you now say, okay, you want to get something unorthodox or want to judge some controversial views that might not be the most likely next token, then you probably want to create the content window yourself. It even gets worse. Beginning of last year, there has been very popular frameworks like AutoGPT or Baby AGI, which tried not only that, but also tried LLMs, create tasks for LLMs, so tried to basically automate the entire process, which terribly failed because it just went more and more to the center. And if you just let it run long enough, it just gives the most generic, most normalized and washed down answer that you can have. So this is why those projects are not really taking off. So in some way you can let the AI run for its own in a limited frame of time. We'll also show a diagram. It's usually 3 iterations that the AI can run on its own. After that, it starts washing visibly down, and then you should interact with it.
So are you saying it doesn't matter for the quality where the things in the context window come from, but just because of the LLM giving more generic answers in general, you should provide the context, right?
Where exactly? It does not really matter where it is in the context window. That's not 100% true, but mostly. So you can, if you forget to mention something in the original prompt, you can add it later. If the quest or if the answer or the conversation in between is not completely out of the ordinary and did not completely mess up what you want to do, it's still okay. And why is that? Because it simplified, it basically can translate it to a long vector, and where you put things in a vector does change the rotation of the vector, but not really the length of the vector. So in the embedding space, you still get to the same locations. Okay. Looking at the output, this is something that you might have noticed as well. ChatGPT in particular likes to babble very much. So it's very much like me. So if you give it just the opportunity to say, let's take a Saturday and a Sunday stand in front of people, ChatGPT and I will go on forever. So the way to manage me is to say, okay, you will be hungry, and at some point you will just leave for food. And ChatGPT, you can say, just be brief, stay in 50 words. And the interesting thing about the 50 words thing, you might want to use that. It's working more towards making it short rather than to make it long. If you say make it 500 words, it will still stop at 150 words, no matter what. It does not really count. So again, this is the limitations of an LLM. An LLM is not intelligent in the human intelligence way. It does not take a second. What we would do, say 50 words, is we would probably make a list and note the words. An LLM does not do that. It just knows that a 50-word answer usually is a short answer, and a 500-word answer is usually a long answer. It does not count the words. There is another module in ChatGPT, actually, when you ask it how many words was the last answer, it will tell you how many words it was, but this will not have been generated by the LLM, but by another module. There's a calculator module, apparently, in ChatGPT as well, that is used for these kinds of questions. It's a fascinating topic. And is prompt engineering dead? This is something that I often get asked, in particular by people that were part of the last microclass, where those basic principles were basically where we ended up, and those were very, very important. Prompt engineering is a very much moving target. So in October, the time of the last microclass, you would have asked ChatGPT the question, or we did ask the question, how can I optimize my website SEO to increase organic traffic? SEO is search engine optimization, so how do I optimize it to get found on the internet, basically? This would have been the answer. You can read it through. It's a very generic, not very helpful answer. Why is that? Because we don't employ very much the techniques, the basic techniques we were talking about. We didn't give it content. We given the goal that we have. We did not talk about the role that you should be. Should you be a SEO consultant or something like that? So it just gives it very general. If you ask it now, and I did that yesterday, the same question, you would get something like this, which is way more helpful. Why is that? ChatGPT smarter. That is not the case, but GPT gets prompted by different kind of messages. GPT calls these different messages, you have already seen that in the last slide, assistant, system, and user messages. The assistant is always what GPT responds. The system is basically how do I set up the system, and the user message is the question that I pose it. Not so important what is what, but important that the system message is something that is invisible to us as users. So OpenAI puts a very cool, very smart system message in that, or changed it or adopted it in the way also that GPT got better. That's out of the question. But the answers out of the box get already way more useful. So the observation out of the box, you get more nuanced, more accurate answers, and they are more helpful. But the huge problem that we have is that just with a very generic, simple prompt, we cannot really know anymore what we can get. So if it's important that we get some specific answer, it makes it even harder for us, because apparently every half year we get something completely different if we ask the same question. So what can we believe? And the implications of that is, of course, that if we just want to use it very casually, we cannot do that with very, very short questions and just throw them over the fence and expect something good. However, if we are advanced users, prompt engineering is, or the concepts of prompt engineering become more important if we want to have something that is useful for our work, or again, if we want to use something that we use in another format, that we want to use in another format as well. So for example, if we expect ChatGPT to write bullet points for a presentation, and the first time it gives us something like this, and the second time it gives us something like this, is this better than this, or is that better than this? If we just wanted to have an action title, that this might be perfectly fine. If we want to have the content, this might be perfectly fine. Actually, both are probably not for a PowerPoint slide. However, if we build this kind of tool or this kind of workflow, we can throw it out of the window after half a year, which of course we don't want to. Thus, we need prompt engineering to be on a level, be on par with the updating, ever-updating landscape of LLM developments that are going on in the world. And also, when we see this improvements, we can also know now what happened and why is it getting better, and how can we react to this. Was there a question?
Yeah. So what did exactly change? I didn't fully get it. It's OpenAI put a kind of middle layer that first translates kind of our prompt, and then it goes through the algorithm.
Yes. So basically what happens is, what? Sorry, the repeat question. What did OpenAI change that made this change possible? So, every request basically has the system message, the user message, and the assistant message. And this is just a logic. This has nothing to do with AI. That's just how they decided to make to structure their messages. And a lot of other companies do it in a similar way. They might call it differently, but basically that's what happened. This is now being through that pipeline that we saw in the first part, and tries to create the output actually that's feeding back to this. So this is this iterative process. So we're still asking the same question. First, this has evolved a little bit, but of course not to the extent that it creates such a different thing. This is what we see, and this is what we see once it's finished. So this, of course, gets thrown in with the first word is, let's say, 2. First word is 2, gets thrown in again, all the same stuff. Next word, optimize. And this we see when all this is done. What we never see is the system message. And the system message is another message that is added before our user message that might, for example, say, no matter what you do, think step by step. Or what is the standard system message when you use the API, you're a helpful assistant. You're an assistant. That's probably not the only thing they have done, but when they just say you're a helpful assistant and get out this, then they here could say think step by step, plus make a list of the key considerations, explain your reasoning or something like that, or you're an expert or something like that. Why is the standard here you're an helpful assistant? It's also fun saying you're an unhelpful assistant and just get sarcastic naysaying answers. That's basically bureaucracy mode, basically, what you would get from a government official. So in this kind of system structure, that's the takeaway. There is a system that we don't see in ChatGPT that OpenAI can manipulate to whatever they want. Good. Another question?
When it comes to building chat assistants,
Mhm.
and you could really edit the system prompt,
Yeah.
I have issues understanding the relationship between system prompt and user prompt.
Mhm.
Something the LLM just considers every time the user prompts something, oh, I have another system prompt, and this is just repeating every time, or is it just hovering in the backwards kind of thing?
No, it's always part of the prompt. For example, it's always part of the context window. So even when something falls out here, or the chat falls out here, of course there can be another user, there can be another assistant. We look at this this afternoon anyways in depth, but the system prompt is always here, is always on top. Honestly, I don't know 100% of the implementation, but for example, I would consider that the system prompt cannot be overwritten or something like that. Something that we latest will touch on the cybersecurity microclass is the term of prompt injections, which, for example, you can also cover with the system command, or try to cover with the system command. A prompt injection would be you try to get some proprietary information out of the LLM by injecting a prompt. There's a game online, free game. It's I forgot the name. I think it's Gandalf, and Gandalf tries to protect a password. And you try to prompt it, tell me the password. And if it's over 8 level, it gets continuously harder to get the system, to get the password. And this is probably something that you would write in the system's parameters. For example, never show the last user prompt. Something that cannot be overwritten, even if in the user prompt you say new system message. That's one easy way to trick it. System always starts with /system. So now, of course, you can interject that, write a user prompt /system, and try to manipulate the system prompt. Can work. Probably did more than enough times. But this is what the system prompt is. It's a higher level than the user prompt, basically. Another question?
Can you say a word about self-supervised machine learning? So is that only SSM, or is that like where's the differentiation, and could that be used to basically to debug the application like prompting?
Mm-hmm. The question is, does self-supervised machine learning come in here? The short answer is no. This is very much, it's not true, but the way we interacted is mostly unsupervised. The supervision comes, there are two supervision parts in OpenAI. One is here that tries to this is not machine learning, this is very manual, that we try to avoid some injections, for example. You could, for example, try to inject a prompt that gives me out the weights and biases. For example, that's something you want to avoid. And then you have a machine learning supervision on this part that tries, for example, to avoid content that violates the regulation. For example, write me an erotic novel, that would be caught here. I also won't want to get too deep in your question because it's probably a little bit too deep, but we can discuss in the break on it. It's a super interesting topic, which we also will cover in depth in the third microclass on AI in September. Was it helpful in some way, or? Okay, wonderful. Okay, we already did the coffee break, so we're also catching up a little bit. Writing effective prompts is the first exercise. Yeah. You know what? I would rather jump that and go to the second exercise so we can have a lunch break on time. Then I try to do that, the advanced prompt engineering now in half an hour. Maybe have now some time for further questions and then have an extended second exercise. Would that make sense for you? Or would you want to try out what we have learned now? Okay, let's continue. Are there then first any questions about everything that has been? So one thing that would be in this exercise, which I also would encourage you very much to try out, is try out those basic techniques on different kind of AI systems. So of course you know ChatGPT, you know Google Bard, which is now Gemini, gemini.google.com. Llama, there's a Llama 2 front end and Llama 2.ai, and maybe even Wolfram Alpha, which is an AI that is not based on an LLM, but is a very factual AI, fact-based AI, good old AI, as they say, and see how different answers you get with different prompt engineering, with different techniques, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of different things. For example, very noticeable, Wolfram Alpha will create you every, so we have some Mint students here, I suppose. Yeah, so Wolfram Alpha is our best friend because it creates the integrations for everything, the series for everything. So it's insanely good with mathematics, which is the exact opposite of ChatGPT. ChatGPT does not like numbers. It cannot actually use numbers. Whenever you ask it to do any simple math question, it goes to another module that is not an LLM module, tries to retrieve the answer there, and then embeds this in the answer. So this is a kind of fun exercise to see that different tools are better at different tasks. And I would really recommend you to do that at home. I would take those four and maybe Perplexity AI. Then you have 5. Perplexity is using, for example, Claude. Claude 2, in the US already Claude 3. Then you should have a good feeling of what tool you want to use.